Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Talking Nerdy podcast. I'm Aaron.
I'm Sam.
And today we're going to be discussing tabletop RPGs.
A bunch of them.
A bunch, yeah. Yeah. I guess it's just kind of a discussion of the different ones that we are familiar with, whether through playing or through other podcasts or, video streams that use different game systems.
Yeah, just like thoughts and sort of compare and contrast and our favorite bits about them.
We've had our, on the YouTube channel, the videos doing our Welcome to the Tavern bit where we talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we are going to be leading off this discussion with Dungeons and Dragons, but I figured, this is a little bit more broad than that because we'll be talking about other game systems, and we haven't done a podcast episode about tabletops, and that's like such a big part of what our friends group does.
Exactly, yeah.
So I figured it was time to actually talk about.
It's such a big part of my life, which is kind of why I enjoy us starting the Welcome to the Tavern, but it's usually cramming one small bit of D&D into 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Which is fun and good discussion.
Yeah, keeps it topical.
This just podcast lets us ramble about all the different RPGs we like, so.
Yeah. So we're going to start off with Dungeons and Dragons, which of course, for those of you that don't know, there's different editions
Exactly.
of Dungeons and Dragons, which changes the gameplay significantly in a lot of different ways depending on what edition you're coming from and transitioning to.
Mm-hmm. It changes the mechanics a decent amount depending on which edition you're hopping from one to the next. Because I know I started off with 4th edition. I think you started off with 4th edition as well.
And played 4th edition for 10 years.
Exactly. And so the mechanics of 4th edition are fairly different from 3.5 or from the 5th edition now. So
and I'm not familiar with 3.5 at all. I never did any.
You never played? That's right.
I was not part of any of the groups that were let's go back to the old stuff. I started with 4th edition.
Lordy, is it complicated?
That's what I understand. With 3.5, you have a lot of books for one, so that you can draw material from, and then a much more complicated combat system and character creation process.
Mm-hmm. Character creation 3.5, it definitely took me significantly longer to make a character in 3.5 that I was happy with rather than 4th edition, because I know we got the character creator on our laptops and things after a while. 3.5, I rolled that all by hand, and I forgot how long that takes.
Right. Yeah.
Especially with such a complicated system with so much extra lore and extra small things that you can throw in or take out. It's really customizable, but it's also very easy to break, which is why I don't always suggest 3.5 for especially newbies, because just getting thrown into 3.5 it's a lot. I'm happy that I started with 4th edition because I feel like it was simple but still interesting and accessible.
Yeah, and able to homebrew pretty easily. Mm-hmm.
It's adjustable still.
Yeah, 4th edition.
It's not too rigid.
It had enough established stats and character creation and combat systems and things, and how turns and spells and powers and stuff worked.
Mm-hmm.
But then in the DM guide, it's this is your game, so you can leave things out or you can bring things in.
It leaves you a little bit of wiggle room. And I think that's most editions, the DM guides always start with these are how we suggest you use all of these statistics and things, but it's still your game. And I'm definitely the DM that runs things that way. I'll just be nah, we're tossing out that rule. I want this to go this way instead. So
for sure.
I think that's good when you have a little bit of wiggle room with different games.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And then we've recently started playing 5th edition.
We have.
Which has been a bit of a transition, especially for me, just because I played the 1 edition for so long. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of it's not that it was I'm playing 4th edition. It's that in my brain, that was Dungeons and Dragons. Mm-hmm. And
That's
now,
what you're familiar with.
And
so,
yeah,
like,
now when we play it, I'm like, what the hell is this? But
oh, thanks.
but now that we've gotten into it a little bit more, I actually quite like it.
And I only got familiar with it through listening to podcasts, actually, because I would listen to the Dice Camera Action podcast, which is all based off of 5th edition, and it's run by a DM who helped to write some of the books and things like that. So that's how I got to sort of become familiar, is sort of listening in on how the mechanics were used and how they're put into action and things like that. And so I think that helped me definitely learn the system a little bit easier. Being kind of just thrown from one edition to the other, it's a little bit jarring.
Yeah,
but if you have a small transition period, you start to warm up to 5th edition. And I very much enjoy it.
Yeah. Like, I just opened the PDF and was like, what?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right, well, let's roll with it. But yeah, so Dungeons and Dragons for sure is the RPG that we play the most. And the tabletop that we dedicate the most of our time and energy to, both as players and as DMs. But 2, I think it's definitely our favorite.
It's my favorite,
just
for
because
sure.
Of, 1, its versatility, and then 2, just the memories that we've made while playing it. Definitely put it at the top of the list.
Exactly. I'm like, it has a fond place in my heart, and I always, like, D&D is one of the things that brought me from being, like, a shy, timid little person into the annoying asshole I am today. I think that D&D can breed confidence, and writers and actors and just anyone, really, who wants, like, a fun outlet.
Yeah.
And that's why I love Dungeons and Dragons.
It's a good cooperative group.
Exactly.
And sometimes
being
not so
social for the unsociable.
Yeah, really is. And I gotta say, because of how much I enjoy D&D and how often we would play it, it really, I think, kept me away from trying other RPGs, in a way.
Because you're like, this is the one that I like, why would I try something else?
Right, that and, like, I already know the system.
That's
so
fair.
If I'm going to run a campaign, and I'm going to come up with a story and everything, I'm just going to do 4th edition D&D.
Yeah, you're going to do it
because
for
I'm
the
gonna
system
I'm going to be confident, and I don't have to learn anything new. I've never been like, I want to try Pathfinder, and I'm going to read up on it, and we're going to do it. I've never, thought that. Every time I'm like, I have this great idea, I immediately conform that idea to the D&D platform.
Like, how would I make this work through this edition of D&D?
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like that's usually how my brain works too, but because I do listen to so much audio mediums with different kinds.
You're more familiar with other systems.
If I wasn't already familiar with it through things outside of me, either playing or DMing, I don't know that I would ever try to apply any of those mechanics to things that I run. I would probably just stick with what I was familiar with too, but every once in a while when you hear something go really well for a different group, or you think, oh, that's a really neat mechanic, how could I possibly incorporate that into my game? That's sort of what can bring inspiration for me when running the games.
Yeah.
But I definitely do think that starting with what you're most familiar with is a good stepping off point.
For sure.
It's hard to dive in with, with no structure that you're familiar with, and trying to build a whole story and a world with it, and lead people through that story and world when you don't know it super well yourself, Now,
as a player, if someone was to say, I am running a Pathfinder, campaign, do you want to play? I think I'd be much more like, yeah, I'll jump in on that. Just... Nobody's ever...
That's what happened to me,
Nobody's ever done that. Well, yeah, so you have played Pathfinder.
Yeah, I've never run a Pathfinder game, but I have played a couple of sessions of a Pathfinder campaign with some old friends. And it's 100% just based off of 3.5 of D&D, with small twists and things here and there.
Is that when it came out? Did it come out while 3.5 was the current edition?
I have no earthly idea.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure. I want to say it was either while 3.5 was the edition or 4th edition had just come out and people were unhappy with 4th edition. So they took 3.5 and sort of expanded on it
Made
and
a
like
different
adjusted it because they're like, hey, this new edition is not what we wanted, so we're going to make our new edition, which is basically 3.5 with some tweaks, which is, I think, what people were expecting from 4th edition, but it wasn't what they got, you know? And I'm like, I love them all for their own merits, and I don't compare them all terribly much. I just sort of adjust how I play with whatever I'm playing.
Yeah.
But I do have, like, my favorites and things like that, so I guess if someone's favorite was 3.5 and 4th edition was really jarring and they hated it, then I can understand how Pathfinder came to be.
So I guess without comparing them, you know, instead of comparing Pathfinder and Dungeons and Dragons, you know,
they're so similar though.
But what about Pathfinder did you like enjoy? That is something that you would only find in Pathfinder.
Something that you would only find in Pathfinder.
Yeah,
as
just
far
for
as I
like,
know,
giving it its like its own credit. Like, if you want to experience this is the game system for you, kind of a thing.
I hesitate to make any like large claims about how Pathfinder's run because I don't know if that's how Pathfinder should be run or if that's just how my DM was running it, you know?
That's fair, yeah.
But some of the mechanics I found to be a little bit annoying. I don't want to say these things so harshly. I did enjoy playing it, but the way that we played it, it was very much like drawing your sword was a turn. And if you want to get another weapon, you can't just like sheath it and then grab your weapon. You have to like sheath it and then on your next turn draw your new weapon, or you could just drop that weapon on the floor and get your new weapon out, but then you still couldn't attack in that turn. I enjoy like 4th edition, 5th edition, because it's a free action, I think, to draw a sword, or to draw your bow and things like that. The way we were playing it in my Pathfinder campaign was, I don't know, it's very sort of like micromanaging Pathfinder. And that's also, I know we're not supposed to be comparing it to 3.5 right now, but that's also kind of a problem that I had with 3.5, is it felt like if you really...
Too many rules, too many steps.
It's just too much to micromanage, both as a player and then also as the person running the game, trying to take into account of what the players are doing. It just seems like a lot for not a lot of reward.
Gotcha.
In a way. But I did enjoy, Pathfinder does have specific lore with different factions throughout different cities, and that's all really well, like, fleshed out and really well explained, and you can get, like, into a deep dive in some, like, really cool lore factions for Pathfinder. And I found that really interesting, but that's also kind of what I find interesting about most tabletop RPGs that come with, like, their own sets of lore and like different worlds and things. Like, I love learning about the world of like Faerun and D&D, so I love learning about these weird factions inside of Pathfinder and how the world works there. I just think that the lore of Pathfinder is very interesting, and if you enjoy world building and you enjoy checking out different like deep dives of lore like I do, then Pathfinder is definitely really fun to check out.
What about like the character or the like race and classes kind of a thing, you know, for character creation with Pathfinder?
With Pathfinder,
like, did you enjoy the variety, or, you know, I don't know anything about it.
I did enjoy the variety. I want to say that I had a lot more leeway with sort of tweaking what weapons I had and adjusting them to sort of suit my character rather than trying to find a weapon that went well with the character. Is kind of like, I want my character to use this weapon and to use it well. And I feel like Pathfinder gave like a good hand in like, just because I'm a fighter doesn't mean I have to use a really big sword. I can still be a fighter and use daggers or something like that. But you can find specific daggers or tweak the daggers that you have to suit the character that you're playing. Rather than like, well, I'm a fighter and the only way I'll deal damage is if I have a big sword or a warhammer or something like that, you know. So I am definitely a person that recreates their favorite character over and over again for different campaigns. So I was playing my first character from Dungeons and Dragons when we played 4th edition, and I sort of remade her with different tweaks for this Pathfinder game. So I would be still sort of familiar with how I wanted to play in this like unfamiliar system, because that's sort of what made me comfortable instead of just diving in like, because it's always hard to start out in a new system as like a caster or something like that, because magic is always this insane, more complicated thing. It's always hard for newbies, and so I'm like, if I'm a newbie to the system, I want to be familiar with how I want to play. So I usually I just was my usual, like, elf rogue, like you can be in Dungeons and Dragons.
Mm-hmm.
But I found that sort of, as we leveled up and got more experience and more access to different things, you could really, really branch out on, like, what kind of a rogue you are. Because, like, in Dungeons and Dragons, I think they have different kind of subclasses, or you can multi-class, things like that. But, like, you don't have to necessarily choose some sort of weird tree branch and then follow that tree branch within Pathfinder. You can be like, I'm a rogue, and I chose all of these weapons for, like, poison damage, and so I'm going to be really good. Like, a sneaky assassin type of a rogue. But you don't have to, like, click a specific skill tree. You can still branch out and do other things as a rogue and level up different roguish abilities, or even abilities that aren't necessarily roguish, just to adjust your character how you see fit. Because, like, I mean, you write the backstory to your character. Why shouldn't you be able to adjust certain stats? Like, I've played a character that's day blind, and in 5th edition, I couldn't always adjust her perception level. So she would have a really high perception stat, and I'm like, that doesn't necessarily make sense because I made this character blind, you know? I feel like Pathfinder sort of lets you change those stats to how you see fit, to how you want to build your character, and that's why I really enjoyed the Pathfinder system. Although it is a lot. Like I said, it's a lot to handle and to manage, and so leveling up becomes this big ordeal, and so many times our big group would be like, man, I forgot to level up this small bit, or when I leveled up I didn't understand this, so I just didn't do it yet, and we have to stop and talk to our DM. So it makes it hard to sort of level up between sessions and come back ready.
Got it.
Because if you're leveling up between sessions and you have questions, you can't come back ready because you have to come to the session with your questions. If you're a newbie like me.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
It's a lot, but it's also very interesting for character creation and for world building. So that's why I liked playing Pathfinder for a time. I would definitely play it again, and I would probably run a game if I wasn't such a lackadaisical DM that's just like throwing out rules here and there. Or coming up with my own ways of doing things, you know.
What about the dice for Pathfinder?
It was the same. It was the same old D20s, D10s, D8s, and things like that. I know in D&D 5th edition, it's really mostly D20 heavy, with the occasional, like, I think D4s and D6s for most smaller bladed weapons. And, like, you almost never touch, like, D12s or D10s and things. I found myself using more of a variety of dice throughout Pathfinder for different skill checks and different things that I was using. But that could have just been the character that I was playing, so I can't promise that's going to be everyone's experience.
Well, yeah, D&D is a D20 based system, so
and so is Pathfinder.
All rolls are based on a D20 except for damage, essentially. That's really the only
And usually
time.
damage is set by whatever character you're playing, whatever weapon they have.
Right,
It's just going
has
to be
a dice
So you
attached to it.
you kind of like wind up using your D20, and then during battles you use like your 2d6s or whatever, and then the rest of your dice kind of sit there and look nice.
Yeah.
But I found in Pathfinder I used a lot more of my dice, and I kind of enjoy that because, I mean...
You've got a full set.
Yeah, I bought the entire set, and Lord knows I love my dice. I want to use them.
That's cool. Well, I know there was also... I mean, there's a lot of different tabletop RPGs out there, more obscure, more... you know, ones that we haven't played, but that we've heard of and talked about at different times, like the original Star Wars RPG.
Yeah.
Which,
I have never wanted to play the legitimate Star Wars RPG just because it seems very strange, and from what you tell me, it was not a great system. Yeah,
and everything. I mean, I have some of the PDFs of you know, of the old books and the rule sets and stuff, and it just seems so counterintuitive. And then everything, you know, people that I've talked to about it are like, oh, it was a trash system, you know. But then,
which sucks because there's this whole, again, like
Star Wars already has exactly so much lore and everything established,
and so many things that you can do within the world of Star Wars that you think they would make a really good system to make this fun sandbox universe, but no.
Right. Well, and there was also a Firefly RPG, which that one I do want to play just because of how obscure it is. You know, Firefly, the cult classic TV show that was canceled. You know,
Oh my gosh, I was talking with a coworker about how I never finish any TV shows to like their last season. I'm really bad about that. Is like, I'll watch so much of a show, but I'll never totally finish it, and I don't know why that is for me. Maybe it's just because I enjoy when my friends yell at me. But the joke that he made was, oh, well, tell me you at least finished the last season of Firefly, Hardy Har. And I'm like, haha, yeah, and I watched the movie, whatever.
Because it's one season.
Exactly.
Right? Have you seen it all?
That's really accessible. I have seen it all. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
And I've watched the first couple of episodes, like, more times.
Yeah.
And I've watched, like, the last few episodes, like, once each. So even then, I'm still not super familiar. And I've never sat down and watched the entire movie, but I've seen bits and pieces enough that I've seen the entire movie.
Yeah. It's all good.
So an RPG would be great, and I would love to live in the Firefly universe.
Maybe I'll try that out.
Someday.
We can record our audio from that session or something and see how it goes.
Exactly.
But I'm trying to think of other big ones, when you think of like your heavy hitters of RPGs, of tabletops. I guess Warhammer.
Systems. I know nothing about Warhammer other than it seems very complicated and people get real intense about it.
Yeah.
And so that puts me off a little bit. It doesn't seem nearly as welcoming as I thought, like, D&D and things were. Like, Warhammer just seems like a lot.
Yeah. Everything that I've
I
heard
would
about
enjoy,
it.
like, painting the little figures and things, though.
I
think
know,
I
the
would enjoy that.
Are cool. Yeah. It's definitely... I think it takes a higher level of commitment to play that system.
It takes a very intense sort of type A personality, I think, to play Warhammer.
Well, and I know that within Warhammer, there's also different ways to play it. Mm-hmm. Like there's Dark Heresy.
Truth.
And just like different... I know there's different factions, and there's just a lot. I don't know much about it, but I know that it's been around a while. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the larger... more, I wouldn't say more popular
it's widely
systems,
known,
but
though.
yeah, more widely known
systems. Fairly available. You go into like a game store, you're going to see Warhammer stuff there for sure.
Especially the props and figurines.
Oh, for sure.
You're going to see a lot of those for sale.
I was going to say, they have more, I think Warhammer has like more merch than anything with Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder, things like that. Mm-hmm. There's more that you can buy and more that you can customize and things like that with Warhammer that's like physical.
Right.
Whereas D&D, like...
D&D is very
simple. You
simple.
can have a little map and you can draw on it if you want. You can get some like little placeholders. But
and
like,
you don't even need to use
Warhammer,
the map.
you can buy entire like...
Oh, yeah.
Play
buildings.
Sets.
Play sets.
I call them play sets, but
that's funny. That's funny. Yeah. It's accurate, though.
It is. But then... it's a game. Yeah. Don't be ashamed of playing.
Right.
It's fun to play.
And then not every tabletop RPG is D20 based using, those... It's not. Weird, wacky dice.
And that's like a new thing for me because all I've known is the D20 system.
Me
but
too.
Then listening to the podcast, The Film Reroll, they use the system called GURPS, which I still don't entirely know what it stands for. But
I mean, isn't it general role playing?
I think it's GURPS.
Oh.
But I don't quote me on that, so I don't know nothing.
I thought it was GR.
But it's all D6 based, which is interesting. Yeah. You roll multiple D6s, and rather than trying to roll high numbers, Monopoly dice, you're just like, come on, boxcars. Just,
right, it's like Yahtzee.
It's like Yahtzee.
You get the little shaker, and you just, oh man, if I ever play GURPS, I'm going to use a Yahtzee shaker.
Oh my gosh. But if you get triple sixes, that's a critical fail, so you can't yell Yahtzee in excitement.
Right? Yeah,
you
because
have to be
you
like,
want to roll low.
Yahtzee!
which
you want to roll beneath a certain threshold, and then like the higher your threshold is,
right,
the more likely you are to succeed, and how much you succeed can vary.
I think that's
and I think that's interesting. You want to roll small numbers. Yeah, you want to roll
under your skills. So it's like, I guess it's just... Yeah, I don't know. Rolling low is just like... It's counterintuitive to any dice-based game that you've ever played. Like, right. even board games, throw the whole tabletop RPG thing out the window. With board games, you always want to roll high, or you want to roll doubles, or you want to move as far as you can, or like get as many points as possible. And then this one, it's like,
Like the closest thing that
smallest is the best.
closest thing that I could kind of compare it to is like in blackjack. You don't want to push. You don't want to get too high of a number.
Right.
You have that threshold of 21, and you want to like you want to hit that, and that's not how GURPS is. You want to get like
as low as possible.
As low as possible, and then the statistics that you're given for your certain skills and things is the threshold that you're given. It's not like an addition that you add on to your dice roll. Although the DM will be like, I want you to roll your fighting skill or whatever based on whatever skill threshold that they have, and they'll say, but you're at a -2 because of these conditions, things like that. So your threshold becomes from 12 to a 10, and suddenly you have to roll beneath a 10 instead of a 12, and it's so interesting to me that like someone came up with that, because all I know is the D20 system and wanting to roll higher die. So I don't know, I thought it was a really interesting system when I first heard it, but it definitely took me a while to like catch on to be like, that's what they were doing when I was first listening to the podcast, because just listening to people play the way that I listen to people play Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder and things, that's so intuitive for me, because I'm kind of familiar with the system, and even if I'm not, I kind of know you're rolling dice. If you roll a 20, that's good. If you roll a 1, that's bad.
Yeah.
But hearing them just sort of spout out these numbers and trying to figure out the system just based on listening to the podcast alone was a little bit difficult for a few episodes until I kind of caught on to the structure of the system itself.
Here you go. Generic universal role-playing system.
Hey.
So, like, it's literally, it doesn't seem like it was designed for a specific game. Like, the D20...
You can apply it to...
Yeah, the D20 system was really made for Dungeons and Dragons at the time, because it was one of the first, back in the 80s and everything. Mm-hmm. But this says GURPS is from 1986.
Really?
So it's a contemporary of ye old Dungeons and Dragons. So it's been around. I know that
they have, like, lots of interesting mechanics, and I don't know, it's just as well fleshed out as Dungeons and Dragons, I think, but just, like, not quite as widely known amongst people that play Dungeons and Dragons, at the very least.
Well, and Dungeons and Dragons, that dice system in D&D, it's a specific genre. Even if you're not playing in the same world, you're still playing in the same genre.
True.
GURPS being generic and universal, you're supposed to apply your own everything. Mm-hmm. Like, the only thing that it offers is the dice system and the way to build the stats, but you apply it to everything. That's why with the film reroll, they're using movie plots.
Exactly, and they build their characters based off of
the skills and things of the main characters of these films.
And also, like, they've played everything from sci-fi to, like, 80s classics to horror. Yeah. So it can really be applied across genre, across different, like, universes.
Right, they have some
Dungeons and Dragons combat heavy. Specific.
They have some combat heavy episodes in films, and then some that are just, like, so just dialogue and like social skill
exactly.
based.
Like,
and it works every single time.
They've played like Rogue One and things, which they spend so much time making, like, strategy and this and that, and then they do things like Halloween, which is a lot more like role play heavy because it's a horror movie. Yeah, that's like more entertaining. But and I think it's entertaining either way. But it's really interesting the different kind of games that you can pull out of one system.
Yeah, I would love to see GURPS used in a different way, because the film reroll is the only.
I would love to use GURPS.
Only way that I know it being used, because I had no idea what GURPS even was before listening, and they like kind of explained it, and then I looked it up, and it's really cool.
Yeah. But then, speaking of lesser known, specifically only known by our friend group, tell me about your system, Aaron.
Yeah, so in
Travis.
In community college, Travis and I made our own tabletop RPG called Apocalypse. And it's a D20 based system. And similar character making where you're rolling for stats and things, but we have our own, it's not like D&D where there's a wider set of skills. Like this, you have your defense, your strength, and your intelligence and charisma, and those are the base stats for everything.
Say it's a little bit more simplified in the character sheet specifically.
It's a real simple character sheet.
So it's really easy to pick up and just play like a one-off as a newbie or play a whole campaign. It's all fairly intuitive, I think.
But
I've played it, so for those listening.
I think its greatest strength is its ability to, again, be applied to any setting. Mm-hmm. Specifically, it's Apocalypse. We made it as a zombie survival RPG. Mm-hmm. And so far, the majority of the times that we've played it have involved zombies, but it doesn't have to. That's not inherently built into the system. The way that the character creation and the skill usage and the weapon slots and things are designed does not depend upon it being a zombie apocalypse. Yeah, that's just kind of what we've used it as. But something neat that we did was every time the GM that's going to run it picks the theme. Like our first one was just set in our hometown. It was just, zombie survival in Hanford. And then we've done it as Wild Wild West in the 1870s. We've done it as Triassic Park. We've done it as...
I didn't play that one. Yeah. I always smile listening to you say Triassic.
Yeah. Most recently, we did Escape from Alcatraz.
That was very fun.
In 1960. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty versatile with that. But with the character creation, what the GM does is once they've picked the realm, like for example, once I decided I want to run a game in Alcatraz, for the characters, I created a series of note cards. So whoever's running it, when Travis did Wild Wild West and stuff, he made note cards for your occupation. So like the sheriff and the doctor and tavern keeper or whatever. And for Alcatraz, I had prison guards, and you could be a prisoner, or you could be someone visiting the island, or you played the doctor. Jack was the lighthouse keeper.
It becomes kind of a luck of the draw based on
right. So
what you
draw,
create, and then you draw.
You don't get to choose your occupation. You draw them at random, and that is who you will be playing. But then you do roll your own stats, and you roll the D20 a series of times, and you're given those numbers that you roll, and then you can
apply them how you see
you
fit.
You can distribute those numbers to your own stats. But if you roll poorly, one of those stats is going to have to be
real bad,
real shit. And then
I was not a very strong doctor,
right? So and that's just it. You're given your occupation card, and you can kind of distribute your strengths and weaknesses based on how you want to play a person in that occupation that you selected.
Yeah.
And the cards come with a set of starting items. So it's not like D&D where you can just have a huge inventory up to a certain way. You can hold, you have 5 item slots. So if you want to pick something up, you have to put something down. Or you have to find... Yeah, you can find a backpack or a briefcase that give you additional item slots, but take up an item slot themselves. And then everything has HP. So we did it very much like Dead Rising style, where your weapons have HP. So if you have a baseball bat, 5 hits and it breaks, and then you've got to find something else to add to the survival aspect. And, having weapons, you have to roll an intelligence check to successfully, use the weapon. Whereas for a melee, you're rolling strength, and, there is HP of weapons, but there's also ammo limitations, and I don't know. I think it's pretty fun.
I think so. I enjoy it. I think it kind of, the reason I like the fact, I think some people might not enjoy sort of having to draw a character that's already made up for you in some parts of the character, at the very least, like drawing the doctor. if you are usually the type of person that wants to hit real hard, you might not enjoy if you pull a card like the Doctor. But I enjoy it because I think it gives that element of a little bit of randomness and surprise for a player and for the DM to see what kind of a group they're working with.
Right. So it really, I think, again,
keeps it fresh and new.
Yeah, one of the benefits of the apocalypse system that Travis and I made is that it really forces you to role play because you are handed a role. You can't just be like, this is just me with a sword,
right?
Or this
as much
is
as
just...
I love being me with a sword.
But
you have to really invest in the character that you're playing.
Yeah, it's like, well, sorry, like you're playing as a florist, so I don't care what you would do in this situation. What would a florist do in this situation?
Yeah.
Or, I don't care that like you know how to use a gun. You're playing like a bus driver.
Right.
Does that bus driver know how to use a machine gun?
Uh-huh.
Roll for it, dude. Like,
Exactly.
So it really forces you to get into character because you're handed the character. And then as the DM, or GM, because, it's game master, with Apocalypse, I was relying on certain characters to carry out certain things in the plot, to progress the plot. And when when those cards weren't drawn, then I had to take on the role of those
NPCs,
as
essentially.
NPCs.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the occupation cards that didn't get drawn basically became NPCs that were doing things in the background, whether the players were noticing or not. So that was fun for me because, the warden, of course, is going to have a very heavy presence in the plot line of what's going on at Alcatraz. The captain of the guard, none of the key players were chosen. Mm-hmm. You three chose, or the four of you all chose side characters.
We did not choose. We were issued side characters.
Well, you drew them at random. So I was hoping that at least one main plot driver would be chosen because then they would get to carry out the plot points. And so
I was hoping that someone would pull the worst card of like innocent prisoner stuck in Alcatraz
innocent
with a
prisoner.
bad job and bad stats.
That's some of the fun stuff is coming up with the different occupations and then the items that they get to carry.
Yeah, I got to help you with some of that, and we had a great time. I went this like weird deep dive of figuring out exactly like what kind of weapons they would have stored at Alcatraz, and they found forums with lists of different kind of weapons that they had during different time periods, and I got way into that, and then we got way into like, well, what kind of jobs would people have, and how many prisoners do we want, and how many do we want a warden and a captain of the guard, or do we just want one, and this and that. So I think there's a lot of thought. Yeah, there's a lot of thought that goes into creating the different kinds of characters in order to make an interesting game, but also trying to keep it like fairly balanced.
Yeah.
So like,
well, and that did take some time.
There are some of the like underpowered characters and some overpowered characters, and you just sort of hope that things work out well. I
think technically Apocalypse would be in its 3rd edition, if you really think about that.
With all its revisions.
2nd edition at the very least, because Apocalypse 1.0 is literally what we called it when we rolled it out with our friends group.
Uh-huh.
When we, he and I made this in community college, when we had huge gaps of time between our classes, and we were like, well, we're just going to go to the cafeteria 3 days a week and build this game system.
Yeah. Which is rad.
Yeah, and we were doing that around when we started the YouTube channel. 2012 was our big creativity year. We made
so much blossomed out of 2012.
We made our own Star Wars RPG. We made Apocalypse, and we made Nerd Herders. Mm-hmm. So I think definitely by now Apocalypse has gone through at least one major overhaul, and I think. Travis did another big overhaul of it because he sent me all the notes and stuff that he typed up in Google Docs, and I know some changes and things, and I was like, okay, so it's at very least we're running 2.5.
Essentially, yeah. So we have like 2.5 Apocalypse that And then as changes get made, we kind of play test it in different one-offs or different campaigns and then adjust it further, which is like...
Yeah.
I think that's always good for any RPG to be constantly sort of fluctuating to change to be a better game or to be the best game for the players that are playing it.
Well, and I think something that's really cool, this just happened because this game was made by Travis and I, and it's only ever been run by Travis or myself as the GM. Because it's like, we made it, we know it, and then, we've had various players over the years for the different sessions and things, but it's always been us running it. But my coworker Jack, who was the lighthouse keeper, Ahab.
Good old Ahab.
For the...
who melted.
Yeah, he got melted. Yeah, he didn't survive.
I'm the one true survivor of
The
Apocalypse.
one true survivor.
I want that on my tombstone.
The one true survivor
of Apocalypse. It'll be ironic because I'm dead.
Right.
Anyway, so...
He enjoyed it so much that he actually ran it with a group of his friends.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Okay, we talked about
That's
this.
what he's saying.
Out of it.
Right, we introduced him to tabletops, so he is in Sam's D&D group, and then he was in my Apocalypse, or Escape from Alcatraz group, and he play tested both with his group of friends. So he said they did.
We're also fairly new to it, I think. So
yeah, his group of friends who had never played
well.
ever. So he did a one-off using the Apocalypse system, and then one session in to using 5th edition. And so that's really neat for me as someone who helped make this game, and then also as someone who helped teach someone new both of these game systems.
Yeah.
That they were able to go off without all the books and materials and things, but just with the basic understanding, and then successfully use it with another unexperienced group. And I'm I think that kind of proves the fact that the game system functions.
It's very,
it's
very intuitive and accessible.
If Travis and I were the only ones who could understand it, and then you hand it off to someone else, and they're like, what the hell is this?
Right, if you guys were the ones who knew the game system, and then, were the only ones to run it, then it would mean it would die with you, essentially, if you guys decided you didn't want to run it, these Apocalypse games anymore. But I think the fact that the system holds up regardless of who is sort of running the game and how much, in-depth knowledge they have of the system, that proves that I think it's a very good system.
Yeah, that makes it very fun. And that really just, again, adds to the excellence of tabletop RPGs. Because you can make your own, or you can home brew, you can use Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition, but you don't have to play in Faerun. Travis created his own world that we have played in multiple times with multiple characters during multiple time periods of this realm.
Right, there's this entire spanning lore now of this entire world that Travis created based around either things that our old characters had done or things that these new characters know about the land, but they happen in a time before our old characters and things like that.
It's so cool because, yes, it's 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons, but it's also, 100% your own.
Yeah.
Or I guess 95% your own, because the 5% is just the dice system and the character creation from D&D, but the world is your own, the plot is your own.
I enjoy when there's opportunities to homebrew. I'm going to do a shout out to my friend Brandon. My friend Brandon is a world building extraordinaire and is often sending me different classes and races and lore and things that he's coming up with at the top of his head and applying it to either 5th edition or to 4th edition, and I find it so interesting, the things that he comes up with. And I think that any game that sort of gives you the opportunity to be creative like that in your own world building and just using this simple system is always 40 thumbs up for me.
Yeah.
All of my thumbs.
Well, and I
just enjoy world building, really.
Especially today with I don't know, just entertainment's so video game heavy right now. And I'm not saying anything.
It's all virtual media.
Yeah, and I'm not saying anything against video games. I play them every single day. I mean, have you seen our YouTube channel?
But we're not talking bad about video games here.
But that being said, when we, and you can play online with friends, or you can, split screen with friends. It can still be a very social experience and stuff, or it can be a great way to relax. But there's just something special about sitting down at a table with pen and paper
Physical
and dice and snacks and a group of friends in the room with no phones, no computers, no TV. And yet
I'm always
hours...
adamant that snacks make for a good day.
Yes. Snacks are necessary. I should have said snacks first.
Snacks and snacks.
But still provides for hours upon hours of entertainment.
Absolutely.
I
have...
In a digital age, you can still just go back to just a good, fun... And it doesn't have to be playing Monopoly for the 100th time, where the game changes only just so much. You know, it can be something where it's different every single time you sit down.
Exactly, and
I
you
think
can
that's
get really
awesome.
creative with that. Which with Monopoly, if you are playing a shoe that goes around a loop, there's only so much that you can do. But if you're playing a really cool elf road with a cool sad backstory,
right?
And that's very fun. And as someone who has played Dungeons and Dragons through more virtual medias like Roll20 and things like that, because there was a time where I had moved away from one of actually the Pathfinder group that I was playing with, and they got me into like just playing sort of over like microphone and through the website Roll20, and that was fun in itself, but it's still like it lacked that little bit of magic, you know. And it gets a little bit harder to manage, especially like I said, Pathfinder itself has a lot to manage, but then also managing everybody, it's easier to sort of like look at each other in the eyes and know when someone wants to speak and things like that. When you're all just like shouting over Discord, it creates a little bit more of a difficult, disjointed effort for a party. And I think like everyone being sort of physically together and celebrating your triumphs and things like that all around the table is something really, really special.
And there's just something special about being able to look someone dead in the eyes and just be like, you're full of shit.
Right?
Roll a bluff check, buddy. Like, you can...
No.
You can really, you can read people,
Exactly.
You can't do that over a video game or something.
Yeah, no, you can read people and you can form, like, as you're playing certain characters, like, alliances with other characters, or, like, reasons not to like certain characters. Like, that's what got us to be good friends, Aaron, is our good roll-in and our elf escapades.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly.
I don't know. It's something special, these tabletop RPGs.
Yeah, it is. I highly recommend, if you've never played a tabletop RPG, or if you always thought it was...
Why are you listening to this? That's strange.
Well, yeah, if you've made it this far into the podcast,
like, whoa, buddy.
How have you never, like, shown an interest? But, a lot of people...
maybe this is them showing an interest.
That's true, that's true. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to us, specifically.
But a lot of people, a lot of people are aware that they exist, or they've heard Dungeons and Dragons, but there's a lot of people that just think, like, it's too nerdy, you know? Like Jack had never done it, because he's like, yeah, it just seemed a little too nerdy. We're not talking about dressing up in costumes and, we're not... Like, yeah, it can be nerdy, but
Although
it's...
I specifically would. Not everybody wants to or has to.
Yeah,
I'm just that kind of a weirdo.
I don't see the allure of it, but that's just me personally.
Of course not.
But it's just a game like any other game.
Exactly.
And you can make it whatever you want. And so people that are turned away from it because they think it's too nerdy or they think it's not for them, it's like, I recommend giving it a shot. I recommend just trying. If you have a group of friends
if you have
that
the opportunity,
you can convince to be interested, because you can find the information easily online to, run the basics of a game. The dice are like $5.
I was gonna say, and if you're playing D&D 5th edition, you can literally just like download an app on your tablet and then build a character right in like boop boop boop, and there you go.
Yeah, you don't even need the materials. You can just use your phone.
Yeah. So what better age than now to try out one of these cool games?
Exactly. I recommend, taking a break from the TV and just sitting down with some friends and trying it. And then if you hate it, you can say, fuck you,
don't have
Aaron.
To play it ever again.
And go back to playing whatever the hell you're playing. But Red Dead Redemption. I understand not wanting to stop playing that, but
Yeah, you and your endless days of fishing lately. Like, wow, riveting gameplay every time I walk into the living room.
And I'm just standing there fishing, yeah.
But then I go upstairs and I play Stardew Valley, where I stand and I fish, so who am I to judge?
Right.
We all get joy from different things. Sometimes it can be simple and silly, and that's what tabletop RPGs are.
Simple and silly, exactly. Yeah. Well, if you are someone who regularly plays or has at least dabbled in tabletops, let us know in the comments.
Yeah, what systems do you
play?
What
systems have you... Yeah, what systems do you play?
Favorite?
Or your characters, if you just play D&D, what's your preferred, character type, your race and class? I don't know. Just we like when people respond in the comments to things.
I like in the comments.
If you think we're just a bunch of weirdos and we should just stick with playing video games, let us know. I don't care. I appreciate any opinions in the comments.
Let me rebuttal with that of Neverwinter.
Yeah, seriously.
It's Dungeons and Dragons, the video game.
It is.
If you want the best of both worlds, go play Neverwinter.
And it's free.
Yeah,
exactly.
So, if you're like, that all sounds great, but golly gee, do I hate sitting at a table with my friends, you can go play Neverwinter.
Yeah. Or if you play Neverwinter and you're like, this is an awesome game, hey, that video game is literally based on another game that you can go play. So,
yeah. Try out new things. Have a good time.
Try out new things, exactly. And if you have any suggestions for podcast topics for us, or video topics for our YouTube channel,
for sure,
video games that you would like to see us do playthroughs of, or just
whatever you'd like to see,
any kind of content that we haven't thought of yet that you think might be entertaining,
for sure,
please let us know. Thanks for listening, and until next time,
stay
nerdy.